Welcome to Momentum Investing, property investing made easy. One of the world's top podcasts on property investing, bringing you the top experts in the field so you can learn firsthand what it takes to create passive income and take control over your financial future.
What does success really look like? How do you get it? Welcome to the Momentum Investing Podcast. My name is Daniel Wood. I'm one of the founders of Momentum Property Education, and let me welcome you to today's episode. In today's episode, we're interviewing Terri Liggins. Terri is a very exciting individual because she is a ghostwriter for personal development experts. She's hung backstage and literally written the words of some of the most famous people that you know of in the world. In this episode, she tells stories about how Les Brown made his career, how he became Les Brown. So make sure you listen to everything in this episode because there are some key insights here that you'll be able to get that you wouldn't find anywhere else because you're literally going to follow along backstage. Make sure you subscribe to the Momentum Investing Podcast. Every single Thursday, we interview top experts from all over the world to get the inside scoop on what does it take to become successful. So please make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you in the episode.
Welcome to the Momentum Investing Podcast. I am super excited to be here with Terri Liggins, who's worked with, some amazing people. Among them, Les Brown, who you've helped ghostwrite books and really worked with closely one-on-one. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
I'm super excited to have you here, both because of the people you've met, but then how you've been able to implement this into your own life. And you've built multiple businesses, you've raised venture capital, and you've really had a journey. And I'd love to hear, and I know everyone listening to the show wants to hear, what are kind of these key lessons that you've learned? How have you implemented them, and what has it done for your life? But before we get into that, how about you give us a little background to yourself and who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into the details.
Okay, well, wonderful. Again, thanks a lot for having me. I am a, a 20 plus year ghostwriter turned book coach. And the journey to becoming a ghostwriter was interesting in and of itself, in that I always loved writing, and but coming out of college, I found myself in the investment business, mutual funds, and insurance and such, and then from there in the airline industry, in the tech side of things. But it seems like every time I was on the job, I would do writing on the side, even if it meant creating a company newsletter, a department newsletter, something like that. So the writing was always in me. And at a point in time, actually at the age of 40, I had a heart attack, and then shortly after that was diagnosed with a serious autoimmune disease called sarcoidosis. And so between the two of those, it kind of took me out of corporate America in a very quick manner. And I found myself being a stay-at-home mom and figuring out, what do I do with this time on my hands? As though, raising two children and being a wife wasn't busy enough time, but I just always loved doing more, and writing just kind of fell into place when I started helping business owners write their customer letters, their collateral, and just other things. And then that involved just letting people see that my writing was something that was good, and it was evolving into more book editing, which then transitioned into ghost writing. And I found out from various people, because I would never have thought, but I found out that I have a talent or a gift. I would call it a gift, as being an empathic person. I can write in someone's voice. I would interview them, find out their ideas and their experiences and such, and then somehow was able to turn their material into a page turner, grammatically correct page turner, and that's what they were looking for. These are individuals that did not like to write, did not have time to write, but they had the stories. And some of the people, oh my gosh, I wrote for the most amazing, ordinary people with extraordinary stories. They're rags to riches stories. And being able to just really put that in print so that they can help many, many people, they were very grateful for that. So that's pretty much my writing, um, background. And then there's the health and the new venture, if you want to hear more about that.
Yeah, we're definitely going to circle back to that because we were talking about that before the show, and that was really, really exciting. But I know everyone wants to hear some of these stories that you've learned. Could you give us, so I know, I mean, you've written for a U.S. senator, you've written, as you say, rags to riches, Les Brown. I mean, what are some of the stories that have really kind of stuck with you and have impacted your life?
Oh, wow. Well, I have a funny story with the U.S. Senator. And I have been blessed to really not even have to advertise so much. 90% of my clients would come from referrals. This particular time with the senator, though, this came as a result of my son. He was in high school getting an award from this organization. And so at this banquet where he was the recipient of this scholarship, the senator happened to be a member of this organization. And so they had asked me to stand up as the mother, to stand up and introduce myself. And I said I was a ghostwriter and blah, blah, blah. And so after the awards portion of it, the senator found me and said, you know what, I'm looking for a ghostwriter. I'm like, oh, you are? Okay. And so we met and, at his office, and he had, my goodness, a huge, well, he already had a book in the Library of Congress full of his audible interviews, his oral interviews. And he wanted me to take those oral interviews and put them into a written autobiography. And he had a story to tell, an amazing story. He was the senator that took over Barack Obama's Senate seat in the Illinois Senate because of Barack Obama running to then become president. So the way that he received that seat was by way of a governor who was accused. If anyone in America, they know the whole story behind Governor Blagojevich, was accused of paying for that seat, the old pay to play kind of thing. Yeah. The senator was totally innocent of it. He had lived a whole long life of public service, and this was like the epitome. So why would he say no to this to this governor taking the assignment of that seat, except that it brought him into that whole mess. So yeah, it took him a whole lot of attorneys to stay out of that and clear his name, and he felt that this book would help to do that as well, to tell his memoir. So it was a very I appreciated that project probably more than a lot, because I put a whole lot of time and effort and put my whole soul into that project. He was so pleased with it, and it was great. But the funny story was that his birthday occurred soon after he became a client of mine. And I like to send little gifts to my clients, and I sent him a box of brownies from a company that I ordered online, and the brownies came to his house. I didn't not know how the packaging was going to look, right? So the package comes to his house, and it did not have my name clearly on the package some way. And so the senator gets a phone call from his wife that there's some unidentified package at the house. And so they called the bomb squad. They put the package out in the backyard.
Oh, no.
For the bomb squad to come, because this senator had been getting so many death threats along this whole journey of this, all the controversy that he was going through. And so they come out only to find out it was a box of brownies.
Oh no.
So he said, Terry, next time you send me something, maybe send it to the office.
And please mark it well.
Right. Who knew? Who knew? Right.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I think I'll, be more careful when sending gifts to
I'll give it
clients
to you in person next
in
time.
person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We were living in different states at the time, but it was like, oh no, I just, who knew? Who knew?
Oh wow.
So that tells you just what kind of dealings he had, going on just to, I mean, death threats were a common place,
So what were some like key lessons that you took? I mean, obviously you got in deep into his life and that whole journey, both the way to that pinnacle and then the the, the fall and rise, so to speak, again. What were some key lessons that you could take from such an extraordinary person?
Oh my goodness. He had such a heart for the public that he put himself in danger like that, and just danger of his reputation.
Hmm.
For him to say yes when everyone was telling him say no to that, uh, it was just really part of who he was in saying yes to the process. And his process started when he was 15 years old and felt that the swimming pool, the public swimming pool in his town needed to be integrated because it was not. The
Oh,
little black children could only swim between these certain hours, only one day out of the week, something crazy like
oh
that.
wow.
And he, at age 15, was very integral, had a very integral part in that whole integration taking
Oh,
place. And
that's awesome.
yeah, yeah. So he knew at a very young age that he was about the people and
He was
about.
going to be a politician.
Yep, yep. And he had so many firsts in his career. When he was 30 something years old, 33, he was the first African American vice president of the bank. I
Oh
think
wow.
it later became the City National Bank, but it wasn't that initially. So
That's
just firsts all along the way.
So
Um,
what was it that made him so special? I mean, obviously there were lots of African American men all over the world. What made him so unique?
in what he did or as a
Yeah,
client.
as a person, to do what he did.
Yeah, he's very humble, that's for sure. Very humble to be in politics. That's
Okay, yeah.
that was
In
the
American
refreshing thing.
politics too, right?
American, right, American politics. Because because in his book, he had the opportunity to really set the record straight in a way that and I would never tell someone to put anything false in their book,
Yeah,
but especially for book sales, but
yeah.
but granted, people were really looking for, and his publisher was kind of looking for, well, where is some dirt? Where is something, not just some dirt, but what is like something controversial or sexy that we can put in the trailer, in the tagline, not the tagline, but just, in the advertisement to make people run and buy this book. And he said no. He said no to it. He did not want it. So he was, yeah, he's pretty genuine in what he does, and just wanting people to know this is my story, this is who I am. And I think it was mainly just to clear his name from all the naysayers and such. But he's a pretty remarkable guy. I still call him on his birthday, and
No more
yeah,
brownie packages
no
then.
more just call now.
Oh
No
yeah.
more of that. So yeah, yeah, and then and some of the extraordinary stories that I've been privy to with the individuals who are just ordinary people. One was a young guy who grew up in the projects in Chicago, and he was born to two crack addicts. Both his parents were crack addicts, and so he just his life just had so much turmoil in it. Yet he rose to become a vice president, and at a pretty young age, because he's younger than I am. He's pretty young. He became a vice president at a large pharmaceutical company.
Oh
And
wow.
so on the back of his book, the little paragraph on the back of his book, it said, I grew up in the projects where the elevators never work. Now I have an elevator in my house and it always works.
Right.
Yeah.
And so again, same question really. What did you learn from him? What made him so, how did he do that? Right?
Yeah, I mean, amazing. And the irony that he went from being born into where there were drugs all amongst him, illegal drugs, to where he's now with the legalized
Yeah.
drug industry. It is just, and again, being a genuine person, gratitude. I would say gratitude all along the way. He was so grateful.
Well, even back then when he started out and had his parents and everything.
Yeah, yeah, just so um yeah, just really he put his parents on a pedestal even through all that. They were
Oh,
young. He said his dad did go to jail through all that, and his mother was out of jail, but she was still just in and out of a bad state. So he was raised by his grandmother most of the time, and from family to family. He was juggled from family to family, and he had a younger sister who he always took with him, always cared for her as though he were the father. And then, so he's just an amazing person, a father, a husband, and father of three girls. And he recently gave the keynote speech to his university where he graduated.
oh, very
Just
cool.
yeah, yeah. So
Wow. So
just
he became like a leader at that young age, and because he was forced to be, and he chose that high road of it.
yes, chose that higher path. In the midst of all that, it really just shows how people just can rise above their circumstance.
Yeah.
They, they can. And he's never did drugs at all. I
Wow.
don't even think he drank alcohol
Mm.
throughout his life from having seen what it can do to people. So it's, amazing how just, how that could work either way, how it could go either way with people.
That's fantastic. And I know a lot of people are against pharmaceutical companies, but I'm sure he's in it in a healing capacity and in the positive side of that mission.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
So,
brilliant. And obviously
yeah.
we're all here fans of Les Brown,
Les
so let's
Brown.
not beat about around the bush. Let's hear, what have you learned from the legend?
Wow, what haven't I learned? This man, I mean, it's like every day is just, he stays so motivated. He is the most motivating person, even when he's not trying to be. Yeah. My first experience with Les Brown was when I was a high school student, and I woke up to his voice every day. He was our DJ in Columbus,
Right.
Ohio.
Yeah.
And then from there, he went on to become an Ohio legislator. And then I then received or purchased a VHS tape when he did his PBS special. And yeah, and I wore that tape out. At that point, I was a single mom, living paycheck to paycheck barely, and that was the only thing I can afford. And like I said, I wore that tape out. My young children, they were just real young, and they listened to it all the time. They had no choice. And then years later, I had an opportunity to, when my children were in high school by this time, a friend of mine just called me. I had moved back to Chicago where I initially lived out once I got out of college. But I was just going to work one day and a friend called me and she said, Les Brown is looking for a writer in his office and I want you to go and interview with him. I'm like, okay. I said, here? And she's like, yeah, he's at, blah, blah, blah address. I said, Les Brown has an office in Chicago? And she said, yes. I said, I didn't know. Look how it brought me back to,
Yeah.
full circle, and so I went and he hired me as his executive assistant and writer. And so being in that office, I mean, in the day that back then, he stayed on the road 98% of the time. He was on the road. I don't even know how he kept that kind of a schedule going.
Yeah.
But the few times he was in the office, oh my goodness, we just, the joke was, like if he's it could be like 5 in the evening, and he's calling, from the cab or something, and he's on his way in. So the girls and I would get our purse on our shoulder, and he's coming in, and we're like, okay, here, sign this, do this and this, and we still wouldn't get out of there until 11 at night. Like, oh no, we're like, okay, we're heading out. I was working on an MBA. I was a single mom, had two teenage children, and it was like, oh, well, for Les, it was no time like the present. He said that all the time. It could be 10 at night, and, let's call, this person needs to be called. We'll call them tomorrow. He's like, no, call them now. There's no time like the present. If they knew it was Les Brown calling, they'll answer.
Yeah.
And so yeah, because he would call me from the road. He'd call me 2:30 in the morning. I need you to write an article for this Canadian magazine. That I'm like, okay. And then he starts talking. I'm like, well, wait. He's like, you don't have a pen and paper by the bed? No, Les, I don't. Or let me open my eyes at least, or something. It's like he's like, you're always on, always
Wow.
ready. I used to tease him. I'm like, you must sleep with your eyes open. I said, I bet you sleep with your eyes open, and your, wheels are always turning. Yeah, he's just, and he had a rule, which I'm sure is still his rule, even though I'm no longer in the office. I still, communicate and do some work for him. But his rule was no bad news before 10 a.m. Don't turn on the news. Don't show him bills. Don't show him, customer letters that may be from a disgruntled customer, whatever. No bad news prior to 10 a.m.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a really good rule. Don't let your day start off on the wrong foot.
Never, never. Always positive. Always positive. And he could turn a negative into a positive in no time at all. But he just, you know, just don't start off that way.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Oh, yeah,
they,
that's really cool. So always, yeah, there's no time like the present. Always going at it, super
yep,
ambitious,
yep,
and
yep,
keeping that positive high energy.
yeah,
That is awesome.
yeah. And another of his things that just ring in my head to this day is how you do anything is how you do everything.
Oh yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, yeah, and my daughter says that one all the time too. Yeah, he he has a real love for my children. He used to get them in trouble all the time. He was like a big kid when they were around. He would do something wrong and then blame it on them. I'd come in the room and he's like, "They did it. They did it." I'm like, "All right," And they're like, "He's throwing us under the bus." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. That's Uncle Wes." So.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So you've obviously used your background working with these amazing people and that inspiration. And I loved you were telling me before the call, you've created this new venture, and I'm going to let you tell us about it. But what I was really impressed by was the fact that you actually raised venture capital for it by being on Clubhouse, by getting in a Clubhouse room and just being active on social media. You actually raised venture capital. Can you tell? Because I mean, a lot of us listeners here are investors, are entrepreneurs, are looking to grow their business and looking to raise capital. And
Mhm.
you popped into a Clubhouse room and walked away with a venture capital firm. So how did that happen?
I mean, um, s- just really having a passion that drives you to keep you on a path, and then having that opportunity come across is basically how that happened. And which reminds me, and I have to just digress for a minute back to a Les Brown thing. And this was probably, there's so many lessons from him that I don't even think about them, but I just do things. And this was one that I remember him saying. He was, I don't know if your audience would know who Dr. Schuler is. He was years ago, he's deceased now, and I'm not sure if his son took over, but he was a prominent pastor in California who he started his ministry as a drive in ministry, drive-in theaters
Yeah.
where will drive in and watch a movie. He had so many followers that he would have drive-in church, and then he built what was called the Crystal Cathedral, because this church was just so amazing, like, glass all the way around, and it was just huge. And so into his ministry, he would, and it was, his ministry is called the Hour of Power.
Mm.
And as time progressed in his ministry, he used to have um, famous people, celebrities on there to give like a 10-minute talk. And I guess that was like his sermonette. They would give a talk. And so Les Brown, he would say, he just desired to be on the Hour of Power. So
Yeah.
he would tell people, I'm going to be on the Hour of Power. And they would say, oh, wow, you are? When? I don't know. Do you know someone that works for the ministry? Do you know Dr. Schuler? Do you know? And they were like, no, I don't. He's like, okay. And he'd go on again, hi, I'm going to be on the Hour of Power. You are? When? I don't know. Do you know anyone who? And I think he did this for like a 6-month period or something. I'll have to ask him one day how long he did it, but he did it for a very long time and would just talk to people over and over. And one day he was sitting on an airplane, and conversation came up, and he said, yeah, I'm going to be on the Hour of Power. And the guy next to him said, really? That is fantastic. When are you going to be on that? I don't know. Do you know anyone who knows Dr. Schuler? Blah, blah, blah. And the guy said, as a matter of fact, my very good friend is one of Dr. Schuler's biggest contributors. He contributes like $1 million to the ministry a year or something like that. I'll make a phone call. He
Oh,
did,
wow.
and then Les Brown was on the Hour of Power.
Oh, that's so
So
cool.
I know it's like amazing. I have to, next time I talk to him, I'm gonna have to tell him to tell that story again. I don't hear him share that story much, but it's fascinating. And so for 4 years, I've had this idea for this business, and it was a pretty big idea. I never like to say it was too big for me, but it was pretty broad, and it's called Fourth Quarter Living. It's dealing with, or catering to baby boomers, because I am a baby boomer. And at this fourth quarter of our life, where some of us having to play catch up, like, okay, I didn't do all that I should have done, or I invested money before and lost it. And now it's time to retire, and I don't have it all back right
Mm.
now. To, what if my parents needed to be put in a assistant living home, and they're here in America, it's like $10,000 a month right now for a very good one, a decent one. And it's just, there's a lot, you got your health and all of these things to consider as far as leaving a legacy for your children. There's a lot to do, and I'm finding that a lot of people haven't even thought about it. They don't want to think about it because it's depressing, or it's just intimidating. So
Yeah.
what are your final wishes? Do you want to be resuscitated or not? What happens if you die without a will and your house goes into probate? All these things. And because the laws are so different state to state here in the US, I couldn't just create this for one
Yeah,
place.
you can't just create one template. Yeah.
Exactly. It had to be all over, at least 50.
50 different templates. Yeah.
Yep, yep. So, but I just kept plugging away. I said, this is just something that I need to do. And then in 2019, I got this urging to move back to my hometown of Columbus, Ohio, and help my siblings take care of my parents. My dad, in particular, was ill, and I was living on the West Coast. I was living in Las Vegas, where it's nice and toasty, just like I like it, 100 and some degrees. That's me. And even in the wintertime, it can be chilly but warm. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, maybe, okay, I'll move back to Ohio, but maybe let's wait until winter is over. And I heard, no, no, you go now. And so I packed up and moved because my siblings, they either have 9 to 5 jobs or they were living in another state. I had a job that I can do almost anywhere in the world. I'm a writer. I can write from my computer, my laptop, just wherever. And so it was on me to go, and I'm so glad I went when I did, because I got to spend the last 4 months of my dad's life before he passed on Christmas Eve, 2019. And so um, I found that I was like in the midst of this thing that I'm trying to create. Part of it
Right.
is caregivers, and how to set up everything properly for being a caregiver, and making sure that the caregivers are being taken care of, because the statistics show that generally the caregiver dies before the person they're caring for,
Oh,
because
wow.
they're not taking care of themselves. Some of us still have children. Mine are grown, but we have children that if they're not in your house, they're still in your pocket, and then you're caring for your parents, and sometimes they're in a different state, and so you come last. And health wise, some people could be putting off going to see the doctor or whatever from an
Right.
ailment they
Just
have.
keeping regular meals and times and everything.
It's everything. So I just, so it just brought me even closer to needing to put a cap on this thing. I'm like, okay, I really do have to create this thing. I'm in the midst of it. I can't back down. And yet I just didn't know how it was going to come together. And I just happened to be in this room one time, and I met this woman who does a pitch room. And then it was even just a couple months later when I happened to be up late. Now I'm an early riser. My day starts at 2 a.m. And so I'm usually in bed, like I try to be in bed, I don't know, 9 o'clock or something like that. But for some reason I was up late doing something, and I get this, as you know, with Clubhouse, people ping you to come into the room. And so I was being pinged to come into this room, and I'm like, oh, okay, I know her. So let me hop in the room. I sat in, didn't realize it was a pitch room. I don't think, or I guess I hadn't even thought about pitching or anything when I joined her room. I just did because I was up, and ended up waiting. I just at some point decided, oh, what the heck? Let me just pitch this little venture I have going. I ended up sitting in the room 4 hours before it was my turn.
Oh,
They
wow.
they had that many people um, pitching, and I just stayed on. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not going to bed tonight. And it was like it was something like 6 a.m. before I had a chance to pitch. And I
Oh, wow.
and they give you 5 minutes. I mean, 5 minutes. Oh gosh, they give you like 60 seconds.
Yeah.
Especially by that time, they were so tired from
Yeah.
hearing everybody's stories. And you know how some people can go on and beyond when they tell you you only have a minute, and some people will still go on for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So by the time they got to me, they were really serious. Like, okay, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. That's it. We're sleepy. We can't take anymore. And so, and I was almost at that point where they were going to cut it off and say, come back another day.
Yeah.
So just, I don't know, the grace of God that they took me. And there was a guy in the room that said, I'd like to hear more about that. And
Wow.
so he DM'd me on Instagram, and we set an appointment. And he gave me 20 minutes to pitch to him. And 10 minutes into my presentation, he said, stop, I'm in. I was like, what?
Wow.
Okay, what does that mean? Do you want to hear the rest? You don't want to hear the rest? It was great. It was great. And in the midst of us talking about certain things, his father had died 1 month before my father died.
Oh. So he
So
had been right in the middle of it as well. He knew exactly why you were doing what you were doing.
exactly. So imagine that, because he knew nothing about that
Yeah.
in that 30-second pitch time that I did on
Yeah.
Clubhouse. He didn't know any of that. I wouldn't have had time to talk about that.
No, exactly.
And wow. And even, I think, even, I can't even remember at what point of the pitch that it came. I think it was just in somewhere along there. We only
Yeah.
talked, we didn't really even talk before my 20 minutes. He told me about his company. But I didn't have a chance to,
And then this is what I am. This is what I do. Terry, do your thing. Pitch me.
yep.
And wow, well done. And so basically, you took that opportunity. You
Yeah.
pitched what you had. It led to a meeting. You told
Yep.
your story, and it resonated. And all of a sudden, you had an investor.
Exactly. A major one.
That's how,
Yeah.
quotation marks here, easy it can be. Is you just put yourself out there and tell your story and let people connect with your mission.
Yep. Yep. And keep at it and keep on that that hour of power path like Les Brown. Just keep
That
telling
is such a
I
powerful
can't tell
story
you how
too.
many.
Is what
Yeah.
a lot of us, we don't want to tell people about what we're doing. We don't want to share the mission we're on because, well, first, if I fail, well,
Yep.
then they'll know. Or who really wants to know my story? Or say how embarrassing it's going to be when I say I'm going to be on the hour and power, and they ask, oh great, when? You say, no, I'm not booked yet, but I will be. I mean,
Yeah.
that takes a lot of courage
It
to
does.
say that,
Yep.
but obviously it worked. He got booked.
He got booked. And just now I'm even thinking about how many times I've told people about this fourth quarter living. I mean, it's just amazing. I've told so many friends. The minute I hear somebody say that they have a parent who has Alzheimer's or some other issue that they're taking care of their parents, I just like, oh wow, well I have this thing that I'm putting together, and I've called people. I mean, that's the embarrassing part, that I have called people, to kind of put together well, because I am writing a book, and that's when they're like, "Hey, when are you really going to write that book?" Because I said I'm writing a book about caregivers, who's
Right.
caring for the caring. And so people will say, "Oh, yeah, I know someone who would be great to interview for your book." And so I've talked to a lot of people about this fourth quarter living and how I wanted this caregiving book to be part of the introduction to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And they're probably like, yeah, she's been saying this for like 3 years now. And I just, yeah, I would, anytime I would hear anyone speak about anything connected to this aging community or this ideal of leaving a legacy for your children, I would talk about this thing that only finally now, 4 years later, is getting some real traction.
Is becoming reality. And that's the thing. We say that when we start out, everyone tells you, well, that's not going to work. That's not a good idea. And then 2 years in, before something has happened, they're telling you, well, I told you so, right? I
I
told you
know.
that wasn't going to be anything. And it takes that courage, that persistence to keep
Mhm.
going. In your case, for 4 years of just
4 years.
working, kind of in the background, outside of the light. And then all of a sudden, it opens up. You got a venture capital investor now. You're going to launch the book and everything else, and all of a sudden, uh, everyone, and that's where it gets pretty funny, isn't it? That's when everyone goes, wow, I always knew this was going to be a good
Yeah.
idea.
Or
Wow,
count
yeah.
me in.
I'm
Count me in.
glad you kept on doing it. That's what I was always there motivating you.
I know. I know. And I didn't even realize it'd been 4 years until I looked at something recently in my goals, my visions or whatever, and I've been writing it down and writing about it. And I'm like, wow, that was, in 2017 that I was writing this. I'm thinking that this was some new, and then, so I have to go back and even just pick up some good lingo that I used back then. I'm like,
Right.
oh yeah, that was good. I need to
I had
be
a good
saying that
vision.
now.
It's
Good
brilliant.
tagline.
So we are sadly out of time, but I know everyone wants to learn more and follow you on this journey. How can we connect with you? How can we learn more from you?
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. I have an 8-week book book writing and publishing course that I'm doing right now, uh, masterpiece. I call it Master Your Masterpiece, because Les Brown always says we're a piece of the master. And so that one, they can reach me if they're interested in learning anything about that. My writing business is called The Literary Front.com, theliteraryfront.com. So I can
Perfect.
be,
I'll add a link to that here in the show notes.
thank you, yes, yes. And then my health and wellness is thelawofraw.com.
Right.
and I'll
share the link again. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's really the company name is the Law of Raw Institute for Balanced Healthy Living. Right. So that so the fourth quarter living will be coming off of sort of like a leg off of that Law of Raw Institute, because it's all about the health and wellness of individuals. So, and I'll keep you informed how that's coming in the next 6 months, probably, before that's launched.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you all taking the time. I got some exciting news for you in a moment, so stay tuned. And Terri, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wasn't that amazing? Terri is so exciting and has such an exciting background. So thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you subscribe to the Momentum Investing podcast, because next week we are going to go in deep into how you get your planning approved. We got David Kemp, a planning expert, going through the process step by step for how you can get your planning approved. Make sure that your property projects go the way you expect them to, the way you hope them to, and make sure that you get that extra profit that planning gives you. So I'll see you next week, every single Thursday here on the Momentum Investing podcast. Make sure you're subscribed. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I'll see you soon.